name's Sophie Grove. I'm editor of Confect magazine and one of the editors at Monocle magazine too. I'm delighted to be here for this London Craft Week discussion about mindful manufacturing. An amazing topic, and we have a great panel. Three amazing individuals who run businesses that are really benchmarks in my mind for what mindful making can really be. And I think we want to explore the topic from different angles, really, looking at what mindful really means in terms of social responsibility, in terms of the environment, but then also maybe tease out some more existential ideas about the mindfulness of making. And you know, we've all, I'm sure no one's escaped the mindfulness revolution, but there are lots of ideas behind that in terms of mental health, in terms of a state of mind, a philosophy that we could maybe draw on today. But hello, Shelley, Mark and Corinne. I wanted to start really with the idea of just the human. Each one of you has a very different business, but you all share a sense of being a human-centric company. Shelley, for instance, there's a lot of joy in your workshops, and there is a sense that you've built your company around the people rather than the other way around. I wondered if we can start with thinking about that, but also talking about how that works for you in terms of productivity, in terms of actually how effective you are as a business and how that's propelled you forward.
I think definitely the more we do for our team and with our team, the more our team want to do for us. I think any job that I've worked in that I've really given my all to, it's about, do I believe in the philosophies and the thoughts of my leaders, and what, apart from getting a paycheck, do I get from this? I think that's really important. And I think at Mud, definitely our teams are, we had our Mary training, which is part of our reconciliation action plan, looking at being proactive with reconciliation with Indigenous Australians and educating our team and bringing them together. That happened yesterday at Mud. I missed out on it, and my son actually works for us, and he rang me to talk about how much he loved the day that they had. And those sorts of things are more than just going to work and doing whatever you do at the office. Yeah.
And Mark, you've got a remarkable factory that you can see flashing up on the screen behind you if you haven't seen the Vitsœ factory, but it really is built around the team, and you have this amazing lunch offering, which is maybe, but it's about building community as well as
amazing cutlery and plates. And
really, what can I say?
That's the most important thing. Yeah.
It's a relatively new building.
Yeah.
Why did
7 years old already.
Relatively
new, yeah. Still feels like it.
Why did you construct it like you did, with that sense of community built in from the very beginning? And what did that mean to you as a business?
Well, we constructed it from the inside out. We started years before talking with human beings about actually what they would really like to work in, and more to the point, all the various places that we had worked up until that point and why they didn't work. For example, winter and summer, coming in at 6 o'clock in the morning and turning all the lights off and then turning them off again at 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, irrespective of whether it was winter, summer, sunny or otherwise. So we just were collating all of those things that human beings would actually like natural light, views, fresh air, decent food, places to meet. I often say we designed the building around serendipity as well, one open space where everybody can just bump into each other, where meetings can be minimised, etc. So, and that's why then when we went out to the architectural profession, and we had actually a competition with some very highly respected names, and they wanted to really design a building from the outside in, because it's so much about the look and the style, and frankly a building for an architect rather than a building for people. So that was the process, and that was what we ended up with, having gone through all of that thinking.
And do you find that that does build a sense of community, purpose, that drives you forward as a business? It's all very well having that beautiful building, but does it foster something that makes a difference to how you make?
I think I'm the wrong person to answer that, frankly, because I'm bound to be biased. But I think the evidence is quite good that it's made a real difference to everybody's sense in the space. And especially from visitors, you see over that 20 minutes, half an hour, as people come in and really start to digest it. And there's so many anecdotes I could bring, but 6 or 9 months after we've been there, a lot of people from the local community coming, a group, I think it was about 8 people, they were having lunch with us. There was an older gentleman sitting at the end of the group, and I noticed him paying attention through lunch, but he said very little, but he was clearly paying attention. And towards the end of the lunch, I said, "Oh, excuse me, sir, I noticed you were paying attention, but what's your view?" And he paused, and he almost became emotional. I could see it coming over him. He said, "Well, I'm a retired police officer." And he said, what happened in the 1980s when the desire to save money in the police force and all the cuts were coming in, one of the first things they did in police stations was cut out the cafeteria. And yet he said the cafeteria was where police would come back from the beat and they would sit around and eat and drink and discuss, and that was really where the work went on of, oh, he's up to no good and keep an eye on this and that and the other. And he said that now it all went to policemen sitting in their patrol cars, and he said what you're doing here is what used to happen in the police force. This is where I'm seeing the exchange between human beings going on, and we often note at our meal times that there are no mobile phones around. And nobody said you can't use mobile phones, it's just actually human beings talking to each other. It's very old-fashioned, but there seems to be a value in it.
Corinne, I feel biased because I've been to your beautiful factory in Haversige. Well, it's really a workshop, and as you can see in the picture, it's round. I mean, we're talking about buildings. I wondered how your structure and the kind of village-like community you've built in the Peak District, which is surrounded by, amazing nature, really was a bit of an experiment for manufacturing. And how it's really, how you feel that works for you in terms of producing product.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. My staff never seem to leave. So I sort of think that tells you something. I mean, the cutlery industry in Sheffield, the sort of working conditions were pretty grim. I mean, it's basic metal bashing stuff, and they were quite horrendous. So I think in the 90s to build this sort of new environment for this small-scale manufacturing was sort of quite brave. I think architecture is incredibly important, and I think that the architecture that you're in as a maker can affect the quality of how well you're making things. So, I think the experiment has worked, and I just think that the built environment is so important, whether that's your retail spaces or where you're making. It has an effect on the quality of the product that comes out.
I mean, Shelley, I think we were discussing this the other day, and you said, porcelain feels everything. There's a sense that you're working with something very fragile, and emotion was mentioned. And I know this is London Craft Week, and there have been so many discussions about that sense of meditative craft and how the material responds to the human. Do you feel that that's the case? I mean, you're really working at scale. I mean, it's a handmade product, but you're working on a larger scale. How do you feel that relationship really bears out?
Porcelain has a memory, so when you're working with it, if you're overly rough with it, if you're having a bad day, you can see, a week later, the bad day coming out of the kilns. Absolutely. So it's about, we've kind of created. There's no industry in Australia for ceramics. It's kind of, we've started from scratch. I remember going up to Stoke-on-Trent and meeting an Uber driver who told me he used to be a kiln packer, and I just thought, they're everywhere here. I could just gather them all up and take them back with me. Having that skill set in Australia would be lovely. But if somebody is having a bad day, the porcelain, you read it down the track. You can't hide from it. You can't be heavy-handed with it. And it either breaks in the process and you don't see it until it comes out of the kiln, or it remembers a form. Then when you've been rough with it, you've handled it incorrectly, it goes back into the shape. So people get quite frustrated with our yellow pieces. And there's a lot of warping with the yellow pieces.
That's for the really bad moments, the bad hair days that you remember forever. I wanted to touch on sustainability because, really this is one of the central tenets of what we consider to be mindful. And I know all of you have gone to enormous efforts to try and innovate in that space. But I wondered, what do you think, is really effective? What are the obstacles in that sense? And how do you bring people along with you? In the sense that, these people, we're talking about the team building, this sense of mission. Do you feel that you can build those narratives with your team? And how difficult has that been? I mean, maybe I could start with you, Corinne.
I mean, there's sort of the obvious things, isn't there? Sort of getting rid of all the plastic and things on that level. But I mean, to me, almost the most important thing is to make a product that is so well made and so well designed that product is around for 50 years. And I think that the team have always sort of embraced that, that they're making a fork, and that fork isn't for a year. That fork is for many decades for someone to use. So I suppose that is, to me, is a sort of quite important aspect of sustainability as to how long that product lasts, because then you don't need to make another one in 5 years' time.
And Mark, tell us how sustainable your amazing 7-year-old factory really is.
as Corinne was talking there, I mean, my mother died 18 months ago, and her Provençal cutlery, which must date from the late 70s, early 80s, late 70s, and my son is here, and he is now using all of the Provençal cutlery, so born out, but absolutely lasting and still looking delightful. After those 50 years, I think all of us underpin that. And here we are sitting here in Vitsœ's 65th year since Vitsœ was founded, coming up 40 years next year since I became involved as a mere slip of a lad over there on Blandford Street. So the longevity underpins everything. For us, that's rooted in system thinking. There's one of my colleagues in New York later this evening talking on system thinking, that the fact that we make Lego for grown-ups, that our customers can buy a few bits and then constantly be adapting and changing them. Mr. Mullins here, good evening, sir. What do we reckon, about 30 years that you've been adapting it and changing it? Coming up to me this evening and saying, do you remember planning my shelves for me all those years ago? Yes indeed, but that is just one anecdote of the many of the longevity. So the building that you're kindly talking about, we got special dispensation from HMRC, the Inland Revenue as was, for it to be depreciated over 100 years, not 50 years, because of the way we had designed and made it. The fact that we designed that building also as a kit of parts. Our furniture, even this is a kit of parts, that's obviously is, but the building is a kit of parts so that we could constantly be rearranging it. And the number of people coming back in now who haven't been since, say, pre-COVID and going, oh my God, how it's changed in here. Yes, because it can, because we can take beams out, move them around, put them in different places. So that's all underpinning that longevity, and it's allowing yourself to reconfigure ad infinitum, Lego for grown-ups.
Shelley, you're a very global business working from a rather far-flung isle, and I know that sustainability, you have to take it very seriously, given your logistics, but given your industry. But it's an uphill struggle in some ways for you, with so much climate change happening. But I'd be really interested to know about when you first started in the business, how that sense of mindful sustainability and those objectives have changed, and how your ambitions have changed along the way.
I think just in the beginning it was about having a job for myself that paid me enough money to be able to play with clay all day. I mean, that's what I wanted to do. It is a very mindful pursuit as well. So, you can't be thinking of anything else when you're throwing on a wheel. If anybody's tried it, you fail the minute you start thinking about other things. But as the business grew, then my job became the nuts and bolts of the business, and moving into the areas that were not doing so well within our structure. So, dispatch was the last place I kind of worked and then left from. But I will always step into different places within the business. The sustainability I think when the bushfires happened in Australia, just pre-COVID, and the whole country was in flames and people were dying and, huge amounts of wildlife. It was the most tragic and awful kind of sense of despair that we all had. And Sydney is, we just sat in a smoke haze for a really long time where, people with hay fever and allergies and things, it was just our studio was sort of hunkered down. We'd closed the doors to keep that heat and the smoke out of the building. And it was sort of right at that moment, just pre-COVID, that it was just like, we can't wait any longer for the governments to make the decisions. The governments were meant to be leading these conversations, and it just didn't happen. So we just made decisions. We'd had solar on the roof and we'd done a few bits and pieces, but it was really then that we all just said it's time for change, and the whole Mud management team just really focused on what are the things that we can do now, and what can we work towards. And in every conversation, it's the first thing we talk about. So, if...
For all of us tonight, isn't it? The degree to which we are hypnotically sleepwalking over this precipice, the tipping point is going on around us. Yeah. And there's no point debating, do you think maybe possibly, it bloody well is going on around us. And it behoves us absolutely all to be acting and changing our lives. Every politician who opens their mouth says that the answer is growth, whether they are left-wing, right-wing, blue, red or otherwise. They all say that the solution is growth. Is it really growth? I think we should get into a degrowth argument tonight, but we're all relatively smaller businesses than we could be. Vitsœ could be 10 times the size if we just pursued a growth model. No problem at all. We've had the private equity boys and girls offer to buy us. We've had the big furniture businesses offer to buy us, and we know what they would do. They would just wind it up. But that is not what this planet needs. It's not what we as human beings on this planet need. And it's just not being addressed with any seriousness, sadly.
I feel like now what we do is the bare minimum. There's so much more that we can do and that we should be doing as a business. And I think we and the other thing is, I always thought it was so terrifying. The idea of making these changes was going to be so incredibly hard, and I was terrified of it, but just one foot in front of the other. It just happens. And, we capture rainwater off roof, then we use that for washing the buckets instead of taking it out of a tap. You know, we have recycle bins that pick up all food waste. We got rid of all the plastics in the workplace. And it just happens, and there are, you know, there's very smart people out there that help you with all of those things, you know, dust testing and looking after the team, buying fruit so people don't get so sick, because there's always something to eat that's good for you downstairs in the lunchroom, you know. Lots of little things make a really big difference. Yeah.
It's interesting because when you think about mindfulness, one of the real tenets of it is that sense of like not striving and being in the moment. And I think there is a sense that as entrepreneurs, which you all are, you are in a sense always looking on the horizon and over the horizon. But I wonder how you balance that, you know, that sense of innovation, your designers, your creators, with the sense of restraint and that, you know, that desire just for longevity. And
there's also control, isn't there? And we all obviously quite tightly control our companies. So, you know, I this morning I was talking to my polishers because I wasn't quite happy that we were getting it quite right. And I know that Mark's sort of in endless discussions with his powder coaters because he's not quite happy about the finish. And I sort of think that if you go too big, you can't have that ultimate control over. I mean, I know everybody very well in the whole company. I even do my own shop windows because I like doing that. So
you build your own shops.
I build my own shops. But you can't do that if you roll out and do that on a big scale. You just cannot have that infinite control. And I think we're all quite sort of perhaps self-obsessed with that control.
Yeah,
but it's a good thing.
We want to be better. We don't want to be bigger.
Exactly, but I don't think it's a bad thing that you want to have control and you want to make sure every detail is right.
I feel like I want to challenge myself to go. I've turned 60 this year, and so I want to challenge myself to see how far I can go within my business to sort of take mud and create great communities globally. I think that's definitely a challenge I've given myself. So I do want to get a little bit bigger, but I don't want to be that big. You know, oh, I don't know, a bit bigger, maybe 20 stores around the world.
God,
that would be nice.
Me.
That's big, isn't it?
Yeah, that's big. Yeah.
But we're at 12 now, so a little bit. It's a little bit more. But it's only because I want to go to more places and meet more people and do a little bit more stuff, you know.
We're 5 shops and we sell to 90 countries.
Yeah.
That is
so
the
you've
world.
You've got a more unique situation, I feel, than maybe. It's a different system.
Is it?
Well, it is.
But it's interesting that your industry and design and making is you know, obsessed with newness. And in a sense, you know, every trade show and this amazing kind of jamboree in Milan with Salone is just this wonderful carnival of newness. It's addictive, and I imagine that type of balance must be very difficult to resist as creatives.
When in nature have you been to a trade show and seen all of these new species being unveiled? Never, because it does not happen in the natural world. New species come about by a process of evolution, incremental changes that you're not really aware of, that gradually evolve into a new species. And we have deemed it sufficiently arrogant that we can totally abandon that process and constantly be addicted to novelty and keep coming up with all this new stuff rather than concentrating on just making things better. And it's much more difficult to keep making this better. In an interview in 2005, I was asked to list the number of improvements we had made to the shelving system since we brought the production to the UK in 1995. And I came up with a list of 94 improvements in 10 years since we brought the production to the UK. To the outside, the customer couldn't really see the difference, but it's that constant process, and I believe that we have to be much nearer to the process of nature, because nature is now fighting back and telling us that we have abused nature for far too long. We're going to end up with a world that isn't suitable for us to live on. The world will be fine, and everybody says, oh, we're going to destroy the planet. The planet will be fine, thank you, and it will probably be much better off when we're gone, because nature will then rebalance. And you're James Lovelock and Gaia of how it all interacts, and we will be brought back into our position, and I believe that's what's going on at the moment. In Australia especially.
The trade show conversation is a really interesting one, because we participated, and that's where we started, and then we met Mark and we opened a retail shop and we started dealing with people, and we started going, oh, this is nice. Oh, but people actually give you feedback. They want to be able to buy that dinner plate exactly as it is in 10 years, 20 years' time. They don't want you to change it. They need consistency in what they're purchasing. Sure, it's fun to throw a fun colour out there from time to time, but essentially the retail system kind of is driven by newness, but the people who are purchasing it don't really want the newness. They want the consistency.
Absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, a key culprit of that, I think. Are there any Finnish people in the room? Oh dear. Itala. And they're constantly changing the colour of their glass, which our customers just get so cross about. And the glass is a fantastic glass. There's nothing wrong with the glass, but they keep changing the colour. And then the customers come back, and then I don't want that green. I want the green I have, which you can absolutely see.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, but which underpins everything that we're doing at Vitsœ, is ensuring that when you come back 50 years later, it will still be compatible.
It's the same at David Mellor. You can still buy the same teaspoon you could in 1963, because we're still making that teaspoon.
Which is where I think we see ourselves as editors-in-chief. We are trying to hold that integrity together.
Yeah. But on the other hand, you don't want to be boring. So you do have to do a bit of
Completely.
Yeah.
Which is why we're doing events like this tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're not boring.
In a vain attempt, well, not to look boring, a vain attempt, yeah.
But I think when we're talking about this idea of mindful, we're also talking about self-expression, the people that work for you, but also pride in their work, self-expression, creativity, these underpin what you're doing. How central is that to you? I know you have an incredible program at Mud where you elevate some of the workers and people who are craftsmen who are working for you also can sort of throw some more creative shapes and have those exhibited as well. So there is a sense that people are really expressing themselves, and there's that element of happiness that you bring into your kind of mandate as a business.
Yeah, I mean that happens some of the time, not all of the time, but I think we try to do things. We do the exhibition, which I don't think we have done in the last 12 months, but called Mud Club, and that's one, everybody that works at Mud, there might be painters or lots of potters and other creatives who do showcase their work at an exhibition when all of the studios in the Marrickville area are open, and we like being part of that. But then there's opportunities for people to work part-time, so that helps pay the rent while they're doing their creative pursuits. So, and that enriches everybody's life, being able to have, or parents who have kids at the school across the road from where we are, can come and work in our dispatch team and do that in the time that means that their home life is a better home life, because they don't have to work full-time hours.
I mean, a lot of brands have sort of gone down the collaboration route, where there's a kind of new kid on the block every few seasons. Mark, have we reached max collaboration, and what are your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously, it's great to have new, fresh energy when you're making and when you're marketing what you're doing. But do you think sometimes we've gone too far on that model?
You're just stimulating the market, aren't you? You're just finding ways, new ways, every time to just stimulate a little bit of, frankly, artificial interest. I mean, that's why the collaboration thing is so big, and why it works for generating more short-term sales. I mean, fat chance of you coming back 5 or 10 years later and being able to buy something compatible to go with the collaboration product you bought 10 years ago, because there obviously will have been 20 collaboration products in the interim.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I find the collaboration thing really annoying. I mean, you know, if you're supposed to be a designer, you don't need don't need someone else to design it with you, do you? I mean, you do your own design. So why do I want to do a design with someone else? And it's such a sort of it's an annoyance.
It's not always. So, for example,
no, I know you seem to have better.
I do
yeah, no, I know you do.
And I do. I mean, I collaborate with you guys. We've got a store together in LA.
Yes,
and that in a way is
that's not a design collaboration.
It's not a product collaboration, but we are
collaborating here tonight.
We are collaborating here
that's
tonight.
something
Exactly,
different.
Exactly. But, you know, the lighting that we've just done with Zach has just been, I mean, I could never have worked on that without him, because I'm not an industrial designer. And, I mean, I'm not even a trained potter. I just started making stuff. So it's really great to work with somebody who has that sort of discipline and training. But I do know porcelain incredibly well, and I know how it behaves, and I know he didn't know that. So it was probably the truest collaboration I've come across. You know, I love collaborating with chefs and working with them with our product and doing some playful, and again, it's marketing. It's, you know, it's keeping our friends and families and the people that we sell to interested in what we're doing, because they're sort of, you know, everybody loves food, so, you know, you have to put food on a plate. There is a conversation that happens with that. But I agree that, you know, lots of different people have said, can we do a collaboration? And I'll put my name on the back of your product and we'll sell it, because I've got a higher profile than you, and therefore you'll sell a lot more product. And that's a little bit disturbing.
I think that one thing you touched on, which I would sort of agree with on a collaboration, is there's a collaboration with a maker, which can be quite valuable as a designer. It's the collaboration with the designer that I have more of a problem with personally. But actually, the collaboration with makers, a glass blower, a metal maker, is incredibly important, and that is a collaboration. But they don't really ever, I suppose, perhaps get their name on it, do they? So perhaps it's a bit of an unfair collaboration, but anyway.
But I was the maker.
Yeah, yeah.
Just finally, we're going to throw to questions in a minute, but I was talking to some young designers the other day who are with great trepidation thinking about sort of launching products, you know, given the context of climate change. And, you know, one person actually said, well, if you care about climate change, why are you making anything at all? Let's just go home. And I think that is a discussion that's happening. I wondered what you would recommend, you know, a young designer, maker to do starting out. What have you learnt along the way about how to make things, how to make a business, you know, have that sense of responsibility, joy, that balance we've been talking about today, and that timeless longevity, you know, that these things might well be with us, you know, in the next generation or the one after that. Shelley?
I just think that just taking some time to think about what you know, that you are actually creating something that's quite special, that the planet needs what you're making, or the people need what you're making, and particularly if you want it, you know, that small is good. Doing something that in a micro sense is lovely, and yeah, not necessarily, you know, I think you can do things as, you know, definitely pottery has now become quite cool, and there's lots of people who are out there and they're doing their own practice, and they're going to the markets and having quite a sustainable kind of nice time. Your marketplace now is Instagram and the internet, so it's not, you don't have to sit in the rain at Bondi Beach and, you know, wait for people to come by and buy some things. But I think you can start in a small way. I think you've got to be careful of that scaling up and making sure that you're looking after yourself and looking after other people. I think people who work for themselves don't necessarily take the best care of themselves in that process. And, you know, if there's not enough money to get on payday, we don't get paid. You know, so keeping things smaller maybe is a good way to kind of start.
Mark, your company came about in a very different era, post-war sort of moment in history. I wondered, you know, what you would recommend to an equivalent industrial designer or entrepreneur starting out today.
It's very good, Sophie. You pick up the post-war era for Vitsœ because it was incredibly important. Dieter Rams was born in 1932. We know what happened in Germany in 1933. And so what he talks about, the Hitler Youth, of what they went through in World War II, obviously dodging the bombs, queuing for food, and his absolute idealism and those around him for rebuilding in the 50s, for rebuilding Europe. And with him only a couple of months ago when he was over at supper on the last night, he said really forcefully, he said, "Mark, we were against everything." Because they were so appalled with what had just gone on in their name. So they were rebuilding this new optimistic world, and therefore it's no accident that they were trying to do it in quite a different way. So I think that the radical nature of that thinking, responding to the catastrophe of the times, is important. And that person who you were talking to who say, well, why should I bother? We just pack up and go home. No, you've got to be making, thinking, designing for the radical times that we are in now. Vitsœ's business model only works because we're doing everything that they tell you not to do in an MBA, okay? We're completely the wrong model compared with what an MBA is all about. And that's what the young, bright things should be doing, is how do we rebuild the system from the ground up? That's where Greta and her cohort are coming from. You can't change the system just by changing a few elements in it. You've got to rebuild the system from the ground up, and that's the challenge. And so what we're doing at Vitsœ, and we hear it almost every day of people eventually finding us and then realizing that, oh my God, this makes sense. I can get something of decent quality and last time a long time, and when I call you up and need a bit more, you sort it out for me and put an amazing amount of effort into it. You clearly didn't make any money helping me move house, etc. But they find their way into our world. And so what we're trying to do with the 8 billion people on the planet is gradually get more to abandon a cheap, disposable way of life in terms of actually thinking about a life that will work better for them. I was only talking to somebody a couple of days ago, reminding them of when I was introduced at something about 20 years ago, and this person introducing me to a small group, and one in the group said, oh, so what's it that Mark does? And the other guy said, oh, Mark makes the world's cheapest shelving system. Okay? And then went on to explain really passionately why it is the world's cheapest shelving system. And I just stood back and listened. But it's worthy of an academic, we have Cambridge University here, of an academic argument as to whether it is the world's cheapest shelving system or not. Pardon?
Perhaps we make the cheapest cutlery.
You may well do.
Yeah.
I think you.
Yeah.
I can see a new strapline coming.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, the world's cheapest cutlery. Yeah. David Mellor.
But Corin, we're talking, in a way about these utopian ideals that, from the past. And in fact, your factory, your workshop, has that sort of DNA in a sense. It was an amazing experiment. Do you think that any of those ideals still apply? And how would you recommend somebody starting out to kind of focus on really the beauty of what you're doing, what you're creating, and also the bigger picture?
I mean, I suppose a lot of those ideals were moving from grotty, grim central Sheffield to manufacturing in the Peak District National Park in this beautiful utopian environment. And a bit like Mark, our dining table is in the middle of the factory, and they sit there for their tea breaks and lunch and all talk, and it's all within the same thing. I think for this young entrepreneur, I sort of think the maker is so important. and that relationship with the maker, no matter what his design is. And finding the maker is almost half the key, in my view, that you can design something, but if you can't find someone who's very good at making that, whether it's they're making 5 or whether they're making 5,000, you still need to have that relationship with the maker. And to me, that bit is critical, so that you can get something that is such a good quality that it's therefore sustainable.
Thank you so much, Corinne, Mark and Shelley, for all your amazing insights into mindful manufacturing today. And it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.